Hey guys, Jeremy here from mensandgaming.net, bringing you a special video today. It's actually a Hearthstone related video. As some of you might know, I'm a pretty avid Hearthstone player. When I'm not on the 40k tables, I'm behind my computer playing Hearthstone, which hopefully the people watching the video know what Hearthstone is, but obviously I will have some of my 40k viewers watching as well. The Witchwood expansion is about to release, and I'm actually here in the early hours of the morning in Australia waiting for the US servers to release the Hearthstone patch, and I'm eagerly awaiting the release. And I thought, I've been kind of wanting to do a review video, and I started actually doing a full card review video, and obviously it was taking a lot of time, and I found myself as I was reviewing the cards kind of repeating a lot of what I'd heard from other reviewers, and I felt like a lot of the cards didn't deserve that much of it. There was not that much to say about some cards, so I thought that it, wasn't, and also the video started to get into the hours of length, and I thought to myself, maybe instead of doing a full card review, I'll just do a review of the most underrated and overrated cards that I think exist so far in the lead up to the release. And obviously we're only a couple of hours off the Witchwood release, so I thought it would be interesting to kind of put my thoughts down now. When I'm in a position when they can't be taken back, I'm committing to my reviews. And this is also one of the funnest parts, I think, of the release season in Hearthstone, because everything's fresh. Nobody knows how the meta is going to shift, and there's no right or wrong answer when everything's theoretical. So here I am by candlelight, reviewing what I think are the 5 most overrated cards and the 5 most underrated cards based on public kind of ratings. So I've actually got the stats from Hearthstone top decks, and I'm going to be using them to kind of give my feedback. So let's get started into the what I think are the most overrated cards, and I've only got 5 of each, so let's just get into it. And here I am with the first, what I believe to be the overrated card of Witchwood, and here is Wing Blast. As you can see here, most of you that are watching this will already know what the cards do. Wing Blast is a hunter card, 4 mana, deal 4 damage to a minion, and if the minion died this turn, reduce its cost to 1. So obviously, and I'm going to just scroll down and show you what the community rating is. The community rating is currently 4.7 out of 5 after 2,506 votes. So that's a pretty high rating, right? Like 4.7 is a pretty epic rating for this card, and I don't think this card justifies the rating of 4.7. The reason being that I feel like the type of decks that Hunter are going, like whenever Hunter kind of, is trying to include spells in their deck, it's very often, you need that utility to be able to point that spell at face. And that's why a card like Kill Command is the obvious card to compare this to, because Hunter obviously, Kill Commands are an auto included in a Hunter deck, and often people will use Kill Commands to clear a minion to let their other minion go face. And obviously when you look at Wing Blast, you think to yourself, well, that's awesome, because I could just do the same thing with Wing Blast. Like, I'll use Wing Blast to clear the taunt minion so my other minions can push face. And the problem with that assumption is that you need another minion to have died that turn before you can do that. So if you've got a board with 2 or 3 minions, you can't just point your Wing Blast at the enemy taunt for 1 mana. You have to trade something into the taunt first, or kill another enemy minion first, and then use your 1 mana Wing Blast. And I just think that while that utility is good, while that it's obviously will be strong when it works, I don't think that warrants a card to be worth 4.7 out of 5. I just don't think Wing Blast will find its way into enough Hunter decks. I don't think face Hunter decks will run Wing Blast. I think a control Hunter style deck may not even necessarily run Wing Blast, because they've already got Kill Command, they already have Deadly Shot, they already have, what's the other one? Make your minions health 1. So that's Hunter's Mark, sorry. So you've got all these removal style cards. I don't know if they need Wing Blast as well. I do think Wing Blast will probably find its way into Spell Hunter decks potentially, because it synergizes quite well with Unleash the Hounds, but that very niche application, I don't know if it warrants such a high ranking, because Spell Hunter is unlikely to be a premium tier 1 deck. So my revised rating on Wing Blast would be closer to being a 3-star card. rather than a 4.7. Let's move on to the next card. My next card is Divine Hymn, and as you can see, Divine Hymn has a community ranking of 4.5 after 1,268 votes, and that's a 4.5 is a very high ranking. And this priest card I just don't think warrants a 4.5. For 2 mana, you get restore 6 health to all friendly characters. So the closest comparison, I mean, it's got like a double comparison. You can compare it to Circle of Healing, which heals heals all minions for 4. And that costs 0 mana. And you can also compare it to Holy Light, which is also 2 mana, and that just heals a friendly character for 6 health. So obviously this is a lot better than Holy Light because it's just got an AoE effect that only hits your own friendly side of the board. So really strong in regards to that. But I don't think this card is kind of worth a deck slot. And in situations where it is worth a deck slot, I don't think it's necessarily a 4.5 star card. What makes Circle of Healing so powerful in Priest, and I think that's what people are kind of looking at. They're looking at it and thinking, oh, this is like a better Circle of Healing because it heals face as well, and it also, it just heals for more than Circle of Healing. Well, what makes Circle of Healing so good is that it's so cheap, right? It's 0 mana, and it also has the utility of being able to combo with Orshinai, Soul Priest, to act as an AoE. And I think in almost every deck that I know of that has included a Circle of Healing, they also include Orshinai, which means that synergy is at the forefront of the value of Circle of Healing. And Divine Hymn simply doesn't have that synergy. And it also doesn't provide a large amount of burst healing that something like Greater Healing Potion provides. So while I think Divine Hymn is once again a strong card, I don't really think it's as good as any of the healing cards that have really been seeing play lately, such as Greater Healing Potion or Binding Heal for Priests. Like Binding Heal for 1 mana has a similar effect to Divine Hymn, and it just can slot in more easily. And Divine Hymn was certainly seeing play in like some decks that just wanted the extra utility, wanted the cheap spell as well. I don't know. I think Divine Hymn is just too... I feel like it's just too clunky for what it does. I think in a very specific archetype, like the archetype that was seen on the stream, the reveal stream, if you're running like Injured Blade Masters and Clerics and Circles and everything already, I can certainly understand Divine Hymn fitting into that deck, and by no means would it be a bad card in that deck, but I do not think this card is a 4.5 star card. I think this card is like, maybe once again, I'd say it's between 2 and 3. I'd be erring down on 2, but the more conservative nature would lead me to say this is more of a 3-star card rather than a 4.5. So I definitely think Divine Hymn has been significantly overrated in the lead up. The next card, which is a bit controversial, is Chameleos. And I think Chameleos is an awesome card. You know, it's really cool. The art's really cool. The story, the theme of it, it's awesome. But I don't understand how this card is being considered. Many people are touting this as one of the best cards of the expansion, and its ranking is currently, we're looking at 4.4 after 3,372 votes. And that, I just don't think it's anywhere near a 4.4. The easiest way to compare Chameleos is to Shift Azeris, or Molten Blade, but I think Shift Azeris is a better comparison. And Shift Azeris saw pretty much no competitive play, and Shift Azeris would transform into a legendary minion every turn you play it. Chameleos is, I would say, better than Shift Azeris because it's transforming into a minion in your opponent's hand, so it's got that extra ability, that utility of providing information about what they've got. But the reality is, when you're playing high-level Hearthstone, the deck archetypes, often you can tell very quickly what type of deck your opponent's playing, especially once the meta invariably settles down after a few weeks into every expansion. You kind of know almost straight away, sometimes off from first turn. Sometimes, you know, there might only be one archetype of a class in the meta, but with something, for example, at the moment like Warlock, like Priest, you realize after a few turns what the archetype they're playing anyway. So Chameleos isn't really giving you that much information about their archetype. It's just telling you what's in their hand. And while that's really strong information, I'm not convinced that warrants a deck slot. And furthermore, because it's shifting so often, it may very rarely be in the right configuration to be played on a specific turn. Like if you're kind of going into turn, for example, you might be playing like an aggressive, like priest type of deck, like a spiteful priest, and you go into turn 3 and it transforms into call to arms. And you kind of think to yourself, oh my god, my opponent's got call to arms. I really would love to be able to play that card now before he does, but you can't because you're not in the appropriate mana slot. And knowing that your opponent's got call to arms obviously gives you some information, right, to be able to prepare. But the preparation you're making for your opponent's call to arms has one less card available because you're holding Chameleos. Like, instead of having that Chameleos, you could have had something to play onto the board that turn to help prepare for that invariable call to arms. So I feel like good Hearthstone players are often preparing for contingencies anyway. Like if you're playing against an aggressive paladin, you're kind of thinking of call to arms anyway on 4. You don't need to know that they have it in order to be making preparations for it. So I do not think this card is anywhere near, even close to 4, let alone 4.4. I actually think Chameleos is about a 2 in value. I think you can slot him into a control deck and he can be good in that deck, but I think in almost every situation Chameleos will see play, you could just play another high value bomb instead of Chameleos. Like you could be playing a mind control, you could be playing Free from Amber or some sort of strong card instead of him. So I believe Chameleos is a 2-star card. The next card that I think is overrated going into the expansion is the Arcane Keysmith. And this card has got a lot of hype. A lot of people have been really positive. And I can actually feel the beads of sweat dripping down my face from all the candles here. But we can see here that this card has got a 4.1 ranking after 1,706 votes. So 4.1 is obviously not a super high ranking, but most people would consider like a 4-star ranking a good card, a really solid card that will be included in a lot of archetypes. And I just don't think Arcane Keysmith is strong enough to be included in the kind of archetypes that would want to play this card. And I think those kind of archetypes are maybe, and we also have to bear in mind that Iceblock's leading standard, right? So the only secret that Big Spell Mage currently plays is Iceblock, and they run Arcanologist to tutor out the Iceblock so that they don't really interact too much with the big spells in the deck. So you could argue that Big Spell Mage might want to run Arcane Keysmith, but I just don't think it's powerful enough in its effect to warrant a card slot and to warrant a 4-mana play. Now 4-mana play, even though you get that 2/2 body, that's still like you're making a big turn, you're investing a lot of mana to do that. And I just don't feel like the current array of Mage Secrets are strong enough to warrant seen play in that kind of control environment. And then the other side of the spectrum is kind of an aggressive minion mage or a tempo mage. I don't think a 4-mana 2/2 play is that great, even if you get something, like obviously if you play it on 4 and get explosive runes, if you could guarantee explosive runes, that would be strong, right? Because we know that explosive runes is a super high tempo secret. But you actually have less than a 50% chance to discover any specific secret, which means just that you're not getting that inevitability of it. It just doesn't have the power level, I think, to be able to jamming it on 4 and feeling great about it. It just isn't good enough for that purpose. And I think the best comparison, and this may not be the obvious comparison, but I think the best comparison would be to the Paladin Hydrologist, because Hydrologist is a 2-mana 2/2 that you discover a secret that then technically you can play on 3. Like you could play it on 3 as a 3-mana 2/2 discover and play a secret. But Hydrologist also has the utility of you can hold the secret for later. Some people would take against Freeze Mage. They used to take Quest Mage, take Eye for an Eye, and use the Eye for an Eye later. You can use it in a more situational environment to bluff having a different secret. Keysmith doesn't have that ability to hold the secret until later at a discount. And it just, I don't know, I just don't feel like Hydrologist, even in Murloc Paladins, and this I think is the most telling situation. When Call to Arms came out, even Murloc Paladins started cutting Hydrologist. They just didn't feel like it was worth the downside of potentially being pulled as a 2/2 from Call to Arms. And that goes to show how, and that's obviously the Paladin secrets aren't strong, but I just think if Murloc Paladins were cutting us a decent Murloc that discovered a secret, I just can't see a world in which we would be seeing Arcane Keysmith being seen playing a tempo or a minion-based mage. Not with the current secrets. I think we really need to see another strong tempo secret coming out to pull Keysmith into a situation where it might see play. So I'm going to give Keysmith a 2 stars as well. So that's obviously a big difference from the 4.1 stars that it's been rated. All right, now we're moving into the last card I think is overrated, or the last of my top 5, and that is Baleful Banker. So Baleful Banker is a 2-mana 2/2 that the battlecry is choose a friendly minion, shuffle a copy of it into your deck. And this card is actually, as I say this, currently exists in standard in the form of the, let me check my notes, the Manic Soulcaster. We know that the 3-mana 3/4 mage card that has the same battlecry, even though it is worded slightly differently. It is the same battlecry, same effect. And that Manic Soulcaster has never seen really any competitive play. So obviously we know why Baleful Banker might be receiving the score it is. And that's because of its ability to work with the new Shaman Legendary that casts all the battle cries again that you've played in the game. And if you're playing that Legendary, and its name does escape my mind at the moment, but it makes sense to have Baleful Banker in that deck. And that, I agree, could be decent. You could have Baleful Banker in that Chamois deck, but I don't think you need it. I think running something like Zola the Gorgon, or just having the ability to bounce the minion back to your hand via, for example, Grumble the World Shaker, that is better than having a Baleful Banker battlecry for that minion. So I just don't think Baleful Banker is even that great in the Battlecry Shaman deck. And it's got a rating of 4.3 after 1,034 votes. And I think 4.3 is a super high rating for a card that doesn't get you any tempo right away. Like, unlike, let's compare it to Zola. Zola's a 3-mana 2/2, but Zola, rather than putting the minion, into your deck, it puts it into your hand. So while Zola is more expensive, Zola's giving you the guaranteed ability to use that minion next turn, or it's going back to your hand. So you're effectively drawing a card. Whereas Baleful Banker is just extending your deck. It's meaning that you're going to draw that card eventually. But the problem is, rather than thinning your deck, it actually thickens your deck. And the term thickening of a deck is not something we actually really use, because it doesn't occur to many minions. Not many minions have that effect, and it's not a good effect. Unless you're using that on specifically a super high value card, you don't want to thicken your deck. So with Baleful Banker, unless you're using that effect on the legendary itself, which you're obviously not, you want to use it before you use the legendary, I just don't think you want to be thickening your deck and reducing the chance that you're going to be drawing really effectual important cards. So I don't think Baleful Banker is great. Its tempo utility is low. Even casting it on, like, if you are playing the Battlecry Shaman deck, you're going to be wanting to be holding and controlling the board in the early to middle stage of the game, not dying. And playing a low tempo card like this does not help with that at all. So I unfortunately do not think this is a 4.1, 4.3. I think Baleful Banker is more close to a 3-star card, and situationally very useful, but by no means is this like an all-star spectacular card that we'll be seeing playing a lot of decks. I just think Zola's better, and Zola's not even seeing great amounts of play at the moment. So yeah, this is a 3-star card for me. And that rounds out my 5 most overrated cards so far that I think going into the Witchwood. But where you have your overrated cards, there's also cards that I think people are sleeping on a bit, that people just aren't giving enough credit to. And I've gone through and I've come up basically with cards that have low rankings, community rankings, that I think should have significantly higher rankings. So let's go into these cards. And the first one is the Witchwood Piper. Now, the Witchwood Piper's rating is actually not too bad. She's got a rating of 3.7, which you could argue is already pretty good rating. But I think that people aren't understanding the power of the Witchwood Piper yet. The reason why the Witchwood Piper is so strong, in my opinion, and that it warrants closer to a 4 or even up to a 4.5 style rating, is because the Witchwood Piper, and it's not necessarily, when I make this, I'm not purely basing this off that number. I think that just hasn't been enough discussion about the Witchwood Piper in the community. That's probably why I'm making this, not so much based on that ranking, because 3.7 is actually a decent ranking, but I think it should be a 4-star card, and I don't think it's being discussed enough. Because what the Witchwood Piper does is, it doesn't matter if the lowest cost minion you draw. I think a lot of people look at that text and they think, oh, it's going to draw like a 1-drop or a 2-drop or maybe a 3-drop. Well, that's actually not true. The Witchwood Piper will draw the lowest cost minion in your deck, regardless of what it is. It could even be a Malagos. The fact that you can tailor your deck specifically knowing that the Witchwood Piper exists, I think is what makes this card so strong. I think you could compare it to something like Elven Minstrel, because Elven Minstrel has that ability to draw card minions from your deck. But obviously Minstrel, we already know that Elven Minstrel is an insane card, and that's only available to Rogue. Witchwood Piper is available to everybody, which means anybody can work out an interesting deck that could be low in minions, and the Witchwood Piper can draw out a specific minion. And that's in that type of deck where you're running a low amount of minions and using Witchwood Piper as a very narrow tutor effect. The other way you can do it is just Witchwood Piper just draws you a card that is a low cost card. And the good thing about that is that when you draw cards, you want to draw cards that you can play and that give you options in that time, in that period. So sure, you might play a card that, for example, like a Gnomish Inventor on 4, which you could compare the Witchwood Piper to. And the Gnomish Inventor might give you Tyrian Fordring, for example, on it. And you've got to then hold Tyrian for 4 turns waiting to be able to play Tyrian. And you might not actually get that opportunity. You might be shuffling and hustling to try to maintain control of the board, and Tyrian sits in your hand until like turn 10 or 11, right? Then your Witchwood Piper gets the value, in a way. Or the Gnomish Inventor. But what Witchwood Piper does is, because it's drawing the lowest cost minion, it's instantly lubricating your curve. It's allowing you to slot that 1 or 2 or 3 drop card into your turn 5 or turn 6 or whatever you might draw it, which makes it pretty decent to drop potentially on 4 for a mid-range style or control style deck, because it's lubricating their future turns or their early turns that can be a little bit clunky. And it also allows you to selectively deck build around it, which I think just everything, the selective deck building plus the utility of drawing low cost cards, I think makes Witchwood Piper a very strong meta-defining. When I say meta-defining, it's not going to warp the meta, but it will create deck archetypes. I think deck archetypes will be facilitated by the Witchwood Piper, and something like a Malagos deck is an example of that. But the world is your oyster when it comes to this, because of how flexible Witchwood Piper is. So I think it's a 4-star card. I think it could even be arguably better in that it will facilitate totally new archetypes existing. The next card in a similar vein is another tutor effect card, which I think is being slept on a little bit. I mean, I think this has actually received a bit of attention. This is the Sandbinder, and this currently has a ranking of 3. And I think that 3 is a little bit low for Sandbinder because of the fact, once again, this is a selective tutor effect that you can build your deck around. And a lot of people might look at this and say, well, it's just a Gnomish Inventor. Like, Gnomish Inventor are only seeing play in things like back in Raza Priest days when they were desperately trying to cycle. Not really a common card that's played. But Sandbinder allows you to draw, if you are running like a big elemental deck, like for example, Elemental Mage or Elemental Shaman or whatever. Okay, sure, that's really good in that situation because it's drawing you cards that you want to play. When you're running an elemental deck, you want your elementals so you can chain them. So Sandbinder allows you to set up the start of a chain by drawing an elemental. That's good, right? And that is a solid use for it. But I think its stronger use for Sandbinder is in a deck that's running a limited amount of elementals. And the one that comes to my mind is Priest, because Priest have the Lyra and Radiant Elemental combo that we've seen how awesome and powerful that is. And that's actually getting empowered in this expansion because of the Priest card that allows them, I think it's something Nightmares or something, a 3-mana card. It's kind of like a Molten Reflection that you cast for 3 instead of 4, but the minion that's copied only has 1 HP. So the fact that Sandbinder can tutor out your Radiant Elementals and your Lyra to then use in this potential combo, potential massive value turn, I think alone makes Sandbinder, once again, this could facilitate that archetype. There could be like a Miracle Priest deck that could have OTKs. I mean, I've been kind of theorizing this deck a little bit. You could be running Eternal Servitudes that, if you've got 4 Radiant Elementals on the board, Eternal Servitude is free, right? So you could have these massive turns where you resurrect Velen, resurrect Malagos, resurrect spell damage and other type of minions that might have died, and then your minions are all free, Lyra's generating you more spells, and you can just go off, right? And the flexibility of that is huge, and Sandbinder could theoretically be a crucial part of that kind of deck because of that very narrow tutor effect. But because of just the fact that it's strong in any elemental style deck, to me makes Sandbinder, once again, I think this is a 4-star card. So rated down here is 3, hasn't got that much attention. I think it's a 4-star card. All right, the next one, we've got the Ravencaller here. And this one, this was Ali Straz's card reveal. And a lot of people, including when Ali Straza revealed it, were kind of hooked on, and some other reviewers as well, were hooked on the fact that this card looks like it's an enabler for, or like designed to be an enabler for Quest Hunter, because you're getting, it's a 3 mana card that gives you 2 1-drops, 1-cost cards in your hand. So you could look at that and say, oh yeah, you know, I can understand Blizzard are trying to push Quest Hunter. Other people might say, oh well, maybe it's for token decks that kind of want to have minions so they can spew them onto the board and buff them. But that's not what makes me think that Ravencaller is being slept on. And we'll have a look here. It's got a ranking, a pitiful ranking of 2.2. And you might think, well, that's because it's actually a trash card. In many ways, you're right. Because Ravencaller, you're never going to feel good playing this on turn 3. Although in an odd style deck, maybe it's not terrible because it's giving you some cards that could like help even up another turn because you're getting 1-cost cards. But it's just a big tempo loss, and it's not giving you any real mechanics to regain tempo. Because as Ali Straza actually mentioned in a reveal, a lot of the 1-drops in existence, there's not many of them that it would be considered like great or amazing cards to play. So you don't feel great about playing it, but it does have that utility. You can play it on 3 if you've got no other card, but that's not why I think Ravencaller is being slept on. I think it's being slept on because it's a massive, spectacular enabler for Hagatha. I don't think people understand how strong Hagatha is. I think Hagatha is one of the strongest cards of the deck of the expansion. That people are like, Hagatha does have a strong rating. People are talking about Hagatha, but they're not giving credit to the fact that Hagatha needs to be enabled. And all the a lot of the control shaman decks that have existed, that have been played lately, have required a lot of control and spell elements and hexes and devolves, which is rotating, and so many spells to keep them alive in such an aggressive meta that I don't think a Hagatha deck will be able to be super minion heavy. I think a Hagatha deck will need a lot of volcanoes, a lot of other spells, a lot of hexes, even things like Crushing Hand. It's going to need an ability to deal with, you know, minion-heavy aggro metas and control value metas like Warlock and stuff. So the good thing about Ravencaller is you can slot the Ravencaller into a Hagatha deck and she acts as a Kabbalist's Tome with an upside. Because when you play these, the first one for 3 mana and then the other 2 minions for 1 mana each, you're potentially spending 5 mana and you can distribute that incrementally. You don't have to just cast it as a 5 mana bundle like you would with Kabbalist's Tome. You can go one turn, you play Ravencaller, and then you get a spell, and then maybe the next turn you use that spell. So then the next turn you can play another minion, and then you get another spell that you might want to use then and there. So it's got way better flexibility than Kabbalist's Tome, and only upside because it gives you minions as well. So not only are you getting the spells, but you're getting minions that could be combined with other effects. So I just think that Ravencaller in a Hagatha deck could be an auto-include card, and could be a way for that deck to guarantee that it's got value for Hagatha while also having spells in the deck to make sure that they stay alive. So if Hagatha decks make it into the meta, and I think Hagatha is such a strong card that people should be trying to do that, Ravencaller is a really good facilitator for Hagatha. So she's allowing you to divert resources into control elements to the deck while still maintaining the fuel you need to win value games. So I actually think Ravencaller, in the context, knowing that Haggith is a card, I think it's a 4-star card, and that's a big difference, a big swing from the 2.2 that it's received. Okay, next to my next card. This one might catch you off guard. And I actually thought, it took me a while, I had to really think about this before I put it in my list. Because of the fact that it is, for 2 mana, a 1/3 rush, even with lifesteal, is not a great tempo play. But I think in a hunter deck, this card may be very strong. And I'll draw your attention back to when Kobolds and Catacombs came out and Diamol got released. So many people were like, and I was one of the people, when I saw that card, I was instantly thought of Hunter more than I thought of like, you know, Token Druid. I thought, wow, this card is so good for Hunter. And it turned out to be quite good for Hunter decks. And of course we know Hunter didn't make it to the top of the meta in Kobolds, but we can all agree that Diamol is a strong card, and it did make it into Token Druid, which was like a top tier deck for a while. So what Vicious Scalehide for an extra mana gives you rush and lifesteal. And I think that when you compare those keywords and you think, well, is it worth doubling the cost of the card? You might come out with the answer of no. And I think in a pure vacuum, I think you're probably right. Like this card, well, let's just look at its quick ranking. It's got a ranking of 2.5. A lot of people just don't think it's got the value to put in your deck. Well, I actually think it does. And there's one reason why I think it does. And that is the card, which I'm just going to check my notes. We've got, what's it called? Dire Frenzy. Dire Frenzy, we know, is the Hunter card, which has been ranked really highly, which for 3 mana, I think it could be 4 mana. Actually, is it 3 mana? I think it's 3 mana. You get +3/+3 on a beast, and it shuffles 3 copies of that beast into your deck with the same buff for 3 mana. So that's an amazing buff. Dire Frenzy is really good, and Vicious Scalehide, I think, is one of the best targets for Dire Frenzy. People are talking about like having Stone Tusk Boars in your deck so that you can put Dire Frenzy on a 1/1 charge and just hit their face for 4 for 1 mana. And that's really good, right? And that might be a facility. People might run that. And you can run like Tolvia Wardens. Use the Tolvia Wardens to draw your 1/1 beasts that are 4/4, you know, with charge. That's really good. And that's a combo that very well might go into Hunter. But I think in the same vein, having these scale hides is great because this enables a sense of a control element. And it also means that, you know, sometimes rush is charge. Sometimes charge is rush, right? Sometimes you just use your charge minions to control the board to make way for your other minions to hit face. So a lot of the time, as long as you have 1 minion on board, sometimes charge and rush are synonymous. So I think that the fact that this beast has the capacity to be buffed to a 4/6 with lifesteal and rush, I think is pretty awesome. And that's not the only synergy that exists, right? Like you've got Crackling Razormaw synergy, you've got Houndmaster synergy. This beast is just really strong, even with something like a Dire Wolf, right? If you drop a Dire Wolf, then the next turn you drop this down, it becomes a 2/3 with rush, charge it into something, get a value trade, it stays on the board, you just gain a bit of life. I don't know, I think this is pretty good. I legitimately think this is probably a 3.5 star style card, but it's by no means as low as it is. Like it's down at 2.5. I think this card will see play in some Hunter decks potentially. And I also think that it's worth noting that this is a massive buff to Deathstalker Rexar. And a lot of people say, well, you can't, like when you judge a card, you're judging the card based on the value in a deck if you put it as a card slot. I don't think that that's necessarily 100% the right way to rate cards. I think you rate a card as just the effect it has on the game. You have to look at this card and say, okay, it's going to be played in Arena, it's going to be played in Standard, it's going to be played as a Deathstalker Rexar Build a Beast option. This is a massive buff to Deathstalker Rexar. Not only does this beast have Rush, but it has Lifesteal, and it's cheap, and it's all in one package that's well statted. So I reckon that this alone, along with, there's a couple of other options like the 1 mana 2/1 Lifesteal beast. Those two beasts, this one and the 1 mana 2/1, really buff Deathstalker Rexar and make him a lot better at control. They give him those extra lifesteal options. Because of Rush, now you get to cash in that lifesteal straight away. You don't have to just wait a turn and hope that your opponent will let you heal. Now you can like accelerate out that heal and get like a guaranteed lifesteal proc. And that to me, I consider that in my rating. So I'm not just rating this card in standard as a card slot. I think as an overall package, this card is a 3.5. That leads me to my last card for this review. My last underrated card of the Witchwood is the Mad Hatter. And Mad Hatter's, a lot of people probably, would think this card's bad. Like it's a meme card. It's just like a mad bomber that they did an art and, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I actually, when I looked at this card, and I've watched a lot of card reviews, and I think pretty much everybody were kind of like, this is a meme card, right? But I can't help but look at this card and think that it's going to see play. And I think one of the best comparisons, there's two comparisons to draw. The first comparison is Fungalmancer. And the Fungalmancer is a card that was a sleeper for a long time, and recently it's seen playing tons of aggressive board control based decks. And that's because the Fungalmancer, when you're accelerating that, I think it's a 5 mana 2/2 that gives its adjacent minions +2/+2. So you're kind of gaining, for 5 mana you're getting 2/2 of stats, but then 4/4 of stats with charge basically. And that's really good in an aggro style, or a board control style of deck. Another card you might want to compare Mad Hatter to is something like Bone Mare. Now, and please, I'll let you finish laughing, but Bone Mare, when it was 7 mana and it was so influential, for 7 mana you got a 5/5 that then gave a minion 4/4 and taunt. So you were getting 9/9 of stats, 4/4 of it had charge for 7 mana. Well, this card is 3/2, sorry, with another 3/3. So you're getting 6/5 of stats with 3/3 of it charge for 4 mana. So the ratio is actually favorable for Mad Hatter. But the downside of it, of course, which we have to now accept, is that the buff can spread to the enemy minions if they have enemy, if they're on the board. So this card is only really strong when you're the only side of the board that has minions. But guess what? You can dictate how that works. Like you can have a weapon equipped, you can kill an enemy minion, then play Mad Hatter, and then trade in. And the Mad Hatter buffs can just go onto one minion. It doesn't say that they have to be to 3 different minions. Well, that's my understanding anyway, that the 3 buffs could go on the one minion. And if that's the case, then that's really strong. Just, if you do some value trades, play the Mad Hatter, the buffs go onto your minions, like to help make them a bit more healthy. Maybe you get charge on some of them. You may not necessarily always get charge on all the stats, but I just think that this solidifying the board with such a value bomb on turn 4, like this comes down a turn before Fungalmancer. It comes down potentially, like you could coin out a Call to Arms, then you play Mad Hatter on after you've secured the board with Call to Arms. I think this card could be an inclusion in something potentially like a aggressive Paladin. Could also be seen in something like Zoo Warlock or an aggressive Hunter deck. So while this card might be a joke, and I might be wrong with this because I think I am taking a risk with this. I think this is probably the most risky review I've said, but I do think that Mad Hatter is being severely underrated at its rating of 2.3. I think this card's closer to a 3.5, maybe even higher if I'm right in that maybe certain board-centric decks will be able to wrest control from their opponent and then play Mad Hatter. And people that like you look at something like a good example might be Level Up. And a lot of people look at Level Up and say, well, Level Up, when they first appraised it, they kind of said, well, Level Up's bad because you have to have a board of Silverhand recruits to play it, and that's not good. But people that obviously, and most people that are watching this would have unfortunately been beaten many times at the hands of Dude Paladin. Dude Paladin is often happy to sit on their Level Up until it's going to work. And then when it eventually works, it provides this ridiculous tempo play when you're getting like +2/+2 over 5 minions. So it's like 5 mana gain 10/10. Well, guess what? Mad Hatter, you can do the same thing. You don't have to play Mad Hatter on turn 4. You can wait until you've got a favorable board, and then you play Mad Hatter. And it's got that ability potentially to like take a few minions out of AoE range. You know, you might pull your minions outside of Haggard for AoE range or something like that. I don't know. I'm not saying that this card's like it's obviously not a 5-star card, but I think it's been underrated. And the fact that people have just kind of called it a meme card instead of thinking about it as a tempo bomb, I think might be a little bit of a misjudgment. But guys, that rounds out my review. In the future, hopefully I'm going to jump on that train of doing card reviews incrementally as sets come out so that I don't have to get confronted with that mountain of cards before the release. But I did want to say a few things about a few cards, and I have done that. So thanks guys for watching my review, and I'll see you all in the Witchwood coming up very shortly. Ciao.